Hey everybody, Scott Wikle. You're listening to My Kind of Country on Fish Creek Radio. I am very happy to have this gentleman on the air with us tonight. I've gotten to spend some time with him over the years, and he's without a doubt one of the most talented musicians and singers that to ever come down the pike. And he's very deeply rooted in the Bakersfield sound. And he's worked with many of the greats, including Dwight Yoakam and, of course, the great Merle Haggard. Would you please welcome Scott Joss to My Kind of Country? Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing well, hanging out here at the coast. It's a little cold and windy right now, but it was a beautiful day earlier. And went out and did my walk, and now I'm just kind of hanging out here, looking forward to talking to you.
Well, I sure appreciate it. You know, we've had some great talks on the road, and always a pleasure to spend time with you and get to visit with you. And my son thinks the world of you. He really enjoyed visiting with you when we saw you back in September.
Oh, he's a cool kid. I enjoyed talking to him too. That was fun.
He kind of grew up around you guys. You know, I was taking him to Haggard shows when he was 4 years old, and you know, now to see him as an adult and to see him really interact, it's just a cool thing, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's neat that you exposed him at that age. You know, that's pretty unusual.
Oh, he's
at 4. You know, to exposing your kids to someone as great as the one and only Merle Haggard. You know, that's a pretty great thing.
Absolutely. Well, my mom took me to see my first Merle Haggard concert. I was 5 years old, so it was kind of a
Oh,
full
wow.
circle thing, you know.
Yeah, have a tradition.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, tell me, give me a little bit of your background. And you've won California State Fiddle Championships, and I think 3 consecutive years. You've worked with some of the most noted names in the industry. Give me a little bit of your background on how you got into your music.
Well, you know, it was really completely by accident. I was in elementary school, probably about 4th grade, and there was a gal came to our little elementary school. Her name was at the time Jana Greif, and she later became the first female Buckarette, and her name became Janet J. But she came to our school all by herself with her fiddle, and we had what they called at the time an assembly. You know, all the classes, just the first through 6th grade, basically. We all went to the auditorium and circled around this lady, and she played her fiddle. It wasn't a very long presentation. I think she only played 4 or 5 tunes, and her goal was to start fiddle classes in all the surrounding elementary schools in the Redding, California area. And it was, I mean, I've told this story many times, but it was one of those deals that when she started to play was kind of like everyone else in the room disappeared. It was just her and me. You know, it was just one of those. And I was just enthralled with it. I'd never heard a fiddle before. I was not interested in music per se, especially not playing it, you know, at that age. But a very magic moment for me, and at that moment, you know, I remember at least 2 of the songs she played. One was a thing called Blue Valley Waltz, and the other one, of course, was the ever popular Orange Blossom Special, which has become the bane of most fiddle players' existence. But it sure fascinated this kid, you know, and so I it seemed like in a moment it was over and she was gone, and we all went back to class, but I couldn't get that out of my head, and so I begged my parents for months, you know, would you please rent me a fiddle. I want to play fiddle. This lady's going to start a fiddle class with the permission, of course, of the school, which they granted. It was pretty much free. She wasn't getting paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
She was trying to work herself into getting paid for doing it, but it was a freebie thing on her behalf at the time. And my parents finally gave in. I just never quit harping on them. And they rented me a little, I think it was probably a 3/4 size fiddle at the time, maybe even a half size, I'm not sure. But they started the little class, and I seemed to have a bit of a bent for it. I mean, I could hear something and began to play it. She had to show us, of course, how to hold the instrument. And she had been predominantly a symphony player in her younger years and had turned to old-time fiddle music. And so she did teach us the correct posture and all of that, which I'm very, very grateful for, because it certainly did help in the long run. But that became what I lived for. I would carry the fiddle case to school, and of course you pretty much get the crap kicked out of you by the older kids, for carrying a fiddle case of all things. And my little Walkman at the time, of course, had Merle and George, and I was listening to country music while all the other kids were, of course, rocking and rolling at the time.
Right on. Me too.
And then I don't even remember what who the groups were or any of the songs of the day or anything like that. But so I got an ass kicking on a pretty regular basis, it seemed, which really didn't matter. But I would take the rest of the classes and just live for that fiddle class, and then go home and start to play. I had a little Sears and Roebuck. You lift the lid on it, and you could put a record on there and drop the needle on it. And a little record player, and she had a 45 that she had given all of us. And I began to learn those tunes on my own, just over and over, repetition, and drove my parents completely out of their minds. And but they will tell you, that it wasn't like a lot of people assume that, somebody learning to play the fiddle is a lot like killing a cat. It's a pretty horrible sound for the most part. But they don't remember it ever being quite that bad, but they actually had to come and take it away from me at night so that I would go to bed. I mean, that's all. I didn't go out and play. I didn't go out and do the normal things that other kids did. At that point, it was all about fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. I got to learn how to play this damn thing. So that began the love affair with the fiddle, and led to, at the time in Northern California, because of her going around to all the schools, there was quite a large group of kids my age and a little bit older. So I'm talking, 4th grade, somewhere in there, 5th grade. And we had a deal called District 6. Most states have a district, or did at the time, of you had District 6 was the Redding, California area. And for some reason, there was an awful lot of kids that came out of that area that began to play. And there were a lot of contests, and we all started going to those and learning fiddle tunes and competing and doing all of that. And, I didn't start winning. It wasn't like I went in and just started kicking ass. It was, I was down in, I would always make the top 20, but there was that many kids. I mean, there would be 40 or 50 kids.
Wow.
And there were many divisions. I started in the junior division. I forget what the age cutoff was, and then you reached a certain age, and they moved you to the junior division, and you stayed in that until you reached a certain age. And then, the boys would go to the men's division, girls would go to the girls' division. There was a twin fiddle division. And as you got older, you moved up into the open division and all of that. But there was a plethora of fiddle players, and there was an amazing amount of accompanists. We had some really great bass players, stand-up bass players, really great rhythm players, rhythm guitar players, and it was kind of just a magic time. It all came together just on its own, and it was really, really a brilliant, wonderful thing to have happen.
Well, you certainly worked with some.
I was very blessed to have grown up in that time and been exposed to fiddle, and God knows what trouble it kept me out of. Of course, it kept me out of trouble until you start playing in bars, of course.
Yeah, there's that.
But that's the beginning in a nutshell. The California Championship thing. I was the what they called, by the time I was 18, I was moved into the men's division. You had to be 18 and older was the cutoff for that. And I won it 3 times in a row, but it was the men's division. It wasn't like the open division where anybody could be in it. It was for guys only, and the women had their division and all of that. So, still quite an honor and still an accomplishment I'm quite proud of. But I was never officially the state champion, the overall state champion. It was the men's division champion, which was difficult enough on its own.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that was like in 81, 82, or 81, 82, 83. I'm not sure. I don't remember the exact years. But way back in there somewhere in the other millennia. So,
Well, you worked with, did some work with Tiny Moore and Roy Nichols.
Well, the Tiny Moore thing kind of branched off of the old-time fiddling thing, because he was also involved in the contest part. He was in at that point in the open division, but he swung, and in fiddle contests you don't swing. You play. You pretty much memorize the tunes, kind of like going to school today, where they give you all the facts and figures. You memorize them and you spit them back out. There were rules. There were certain things you couldn't do. You couldn't do what they call double shuffle. If you swung it at all, which a la Bob Wills or anything like that, you were immediately disqualified. Certain licks would get you disqualified. You had to stay within the old-time limitations, which is not a bad thing, because it kept that kind of music alive. Otherwise, it would have disappeared much sooner than it. It still hasn't disappeared, but it certainly is not the driving force that it was back then.
Yeah.
We had Betty Thomas, and we had all these Texas fiddle players, Junior Doherty. I mean, they all played traditional old-time fiddle music, and like I said, there were rules and regulations, and Lord knows I was disqualified many times because of Tiny Moore. I found out I started getting bored with playing the tunes the same way every time you went to a contest. You had your version of the tune that fit the rules, and you played it that way. And it became, for me, it became rather monotonous, to do that. And luckily, Tiny would be out. He'd be outside. Everybody jammed outside the contest hall, practiced and worked on their tunes and for hours on end. And all you would hear for hours on end was all these fiddle tunes and waltzes being rehearsed and played and perfected and all of that. And in the dark and shadowy corners, as I call it, there would be Tiny Moore and his guitarist, accompanist, and they'd be out there just swinging. They'd be playing Bob Wills tunes, and I passed by one day, and here he was playing a tune that I recognized. Let's just say it was, like Take Me Back to Topher or something. And all of a sudden he would just, I didn't know it was called improvisation at the time, but he would just start playing what he heard in his head. He would improvise, just make things up. And it would just swing harder than anything, which was against all the rules, like I said. And I became fascinated with that and would follow him around. And there was only a couple of us kids that were excited about that. Most of the kids were very competitive and wanted to win the contest by all means. There was nothing more important than winning or being in the top 3 or what have you. And it's because of Tiny and his improvisation and his Lady Be Good, Sweet Georgia Brown, tunes you couldn't play in the contest, but he'd be out there on the fringe just swinging his ass off. And I became fascinated by that, and he began to notice that I was always there. Anytime he was out playing, I would be like standing right there staring at him, and trying to learn, see what was going on with that, and finally he began to kind of include me a little bit, and then he would say, he'd be playing and just sounded tremendous, and he would, throw me a solo or try to, and of course, you just fall on your face, but that's how you learn. That's how you learn to trust your instincts and to trust your ear, and to go ahead and take the chance. And if you fall on your face, big deal. Nobody cares. And that was the thing that everyone was afraid of was, well, what if I fall on my face and my solo doesn't work and everything gets ruined? Well, you can't care about that.
Yeah.
You've got to learn how to do your own thing, trust your intuition, and develop your own style and your own ear. And he encouraged that. And there must have been, I must have shown some kind of I began to learn that, and I got better and better at it, and he ended up wanting me around, and because it would draw in other kids and whatnot. But
that's really cool.
But I also started kind of going, well, I'm so, and I'm very grateful. Don't get me wrong. I'm very grateful to the Old Time Fiddle associations and the reasons that they were doing what they were doing. But I began to break the rules out of boredom. You can only play Sally Johnson the same way several hundred times before you just lose your damn mind. So I would start out at the contest. You had to play a fiddle tune, a waltz, and a tune of choice, and in the traditional style, and you had 4 minutes to do it. and the judges were in another room. They couldn't see you. The announcer would announce, now we have contestant number 26. His tunes are going to be Sally Johnson, the Blue Valley Waltz, and Don't Let Your Deal Go Down. And that's when your time started, and off you went. You had your 4 minutes to get those 3 songs done. So I started I would play it once through like you're supposed to, and just start improvising after that. And it just drove them crazy. They started disqualifying me, and what are you doing? And don't you want to win these contests? And I began to not even care if I won or not. I wanted to push those boundaries as far as I could. And it was eventually the demise of my even going to the contest. Although I must say, the years that I won the men's championship, I was breaking rules right and left, and they just didn't know what to do with me. The crowd loved it; they ate it up, and the judges could hear the people going bananas when you finished your tune and whatnot. So they couldn't really deny me the championship, although I was breaking every rule they had made. So, and luckily for them, you could only win it 3 times in a row, and then you had to be a judge the following year if you came back. So, I, of course, when I became a judge, I would look for the people who were swinging and mark them up higher than the ones that weren't, that were just playing it by memory and by rote. So I wasn't the best judge for the old time fiddlers. But at that point I was 18 years old, and I just didn't care. I wanted to do what Tiny Moore was doing. Found out that he was working with Mr. Haggard, and started going to the Haggard shows and seeing him and Johnny Gimble, who swung his ass off.
Man. I love Johnny Gimble. Johnny Gimble was my favorite fiddle player.
My God,
I could always pick out his playing.
How could you do better? You can't do better than that.
I loved him because I always knew when he was playing. He had that certain touch when he played.
And a sound.
Yeah, and I could always.
It didn't matter what fiddle he picked up. It sounded like Johnny Gimble.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I heard that record, that very first record he made of his own called "Fiddling Around."
Yep.
And that thing changed my world. That was. Are you kidding me? I can do that. That's possible on a fiddle. Are you kidding me? So.
An interesting note on that album. Merle Haggard wrote the liner notes for that album.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And at that point, I really wasn't. The very first Haggard song I heard was "Every Fool Has a Rainbow," which has, and it was completely by mistake. It was an 8-track tape, which tells you how old I am.
Yep.
But I just happened to plug in that particular 8-track, and that was the first song that came up. And of course, there's no fiddles on it. I think there's a string section thing in the background. But that voice nailed me, and I was not even interested in singing at that time until I heard him do that. Until I heard him sing that song, and so I began to buy every Merle Haggard record I could find, which introduced me sonically to Roy Nichols, Johnny Gimble, Biff Adam, Dennis Romack, all those guys in the band back then, and they all improvised.
Yeah.
Roy Nichols' guitar work, of course, incredible, and Gimble was always just, way outside the box somewhere, and so that ended my old-time fiddling. At that moment, it was over. It was just like, well, I can't make a living playing old-time. All of a sudden, I realized, hey, I can make a living playing music if I get away from trying to be California state champion.
Yep.
You know, because you can't make any money at them contests. You travel around from show to show, contest to contest, and if you don't win, I mean, if you did win, you might have got $300 or $400, which got you to the next one with little or nothing to spare. So kind of silly, you know, and yeah, you won all the titles, but those guys, you couldn't take an old-time fiddle player and drop him off in a nightclub and go jam with the band, because the band couldn't give a shit less about Sally Johnson. They were playing the things on the radio that they needed to play to keep their gig.
Right.
And keep people to come and see them and to play. So I went to some dear friends of mine took me to my first Merle Haggard show. He was playing over at Tahoe, and Gimbal was playing fiddle, and Tiny was playing fiddle. And I went to see Gimbal because I was just like the world's biggest Gimbal fan. And at that moment became a fan of the whole band and realized just what I was looking at. I mean, you had the best country singer up there. You had some of the best musicians in the field up there. And then I knew that's what I wanted to do. And Tiny, bless his heart, because of my interest in what he was doing way back when at the fiddle contest, began to tell Merle, you know, there's a kid that doesn't live about maybe 12 miles from you that has, I think, potential. He began to talk me up to Haggard. And so here I am yammering along. Am I running over any questions?
Oh, no, man, I love it. I love it. You keep right on going. You're doing great. I love it.
So Haggard called me and said, I was driving a school bus up there in Redding at the time. For a year I did that. I was 18. And I got this phone call. He actually called the school where I was working and called the office, and the secretary, I came pulling in after dropping off my last kid, and the secretary came running out. She said, oh, you'll never guess who's on the phone. Well, you know, okay, who? And she said, oh, it's Merle Haggard, and she was just about to come out of her shorts. She was just so excited. And I got on the phone, and I didn't know what to say, and he said, listen, Tiny thinks you're really great. He said, if you can be in Bakersfield in the morning, you know, and that was like the following day, we're taking off on tour, and I'll take you along with us if Tiny thinks that much of you.
Wow.
So I got in my car, went home, got a paper sack, put in my, you know, 3 pair of shorts, 3 pair of socks. I didn't know what to wear. I didn't have anything. Jeans and T-shirts pretty much is all I had. And drove my sorry ass to Bakersfield overnight and got on the bus, you know, got there, went to the appointed place. They were staying at some hotel. I think it was off of California, right off of 99 there in the Bakersfield area. And there's the buses. So I pull up to the bus and with my little paper sack and my fiddle, and got up on the bus, and the only person there was Dino, who was the bus driver, and he kind of looked at me like, you know, who are you and what are you doing here? And I said, well, Merle asked me to come and play. And, oh, okay, well, just go there and sit on the couch and get all this sorted out. And so I'm sitting there, and one by one, as the evening progressed, I was there a little early, of course. You know, here comes Roy Nichols, and he looked at me. He didn't know who I was, and I'm sure they were used to seeing, you know, strange people showing up on the bus, not knowing who they were, and not really caring. And, you know, he went back to the back of the bus and disappeared. I didn't even know that there was a bathroom on the bus. I was just sitting on the couch for hours and hours. and didn't know there were bunks back there or a back lounge or any of that stuff. So, Roy walks in, looks at me like, oh, God, man, what's this all about? And went to the back of the bus, and here comes Biff, and, oh, Lord, geez, another kid. What's going on here? Nobody said anything to me. They just kind of me like, and took off to the back of the bus. Well, the last one on the bus was Tiny, and he finally said, "Oh, Scott, gosh, glad you could make it, And I said, "Yeah, I've been sitting here on the couch for a long time, and nobody's telling me anything. I don't know anything, what to do or anything." And he said, "You didn't know you had a bunk back there?" And I said, "No, I was too scared to go back." And he showed me that where the bunk was that they put the newbies in, and kind of ran the rules down to me, and so we took off. Once Haggard showed up to his bus, we all took off, and we drove. And the next morning, I'm still sitting on the couch. We drive all day, and I'm still sitting on the couch. I'm too excited and nervous and scared to go to sleep.
And you hadn't met Merle yet either, right?
No. And the second day, after another sleepless day on the couch, I finally asked Tiny, I said, what are we doing? Where are we going? What's the deal? 2 days and we're still going? And he said, well, we're on our way to New York City, and we're playing Carnegie Hall.
Oh, wow.
That was my very first gig with Merle, was at Carnegie Hall, and it was a package show of some kind. Don't know, that was in 1981, so who can remember, what it was for or anything. And all I remember is that Dolly Parton was one of the artists. It's the only artist I can remember besides Merle. So, and Merle kind of ignored me. He introduced himself and said, welcome aboard, and this should be fun, and Tiny thinks the world of you, and all of that. And he knew I was scared, he could tell. I mean, he'd been around enough musicians. So he kind of let me slide that first night. He didn't throw me any solos. And he was talking to me in between tunes, telling me, okay, now, you got to watch him all the time. You never know what he's going to do. We don't know what song he's going to do. It's just the way it is. You'll get used to it. And so I spent the rest of the evening, with my eyes glued upon Merle, staring at him like there was nobody else in the room. Didn't get any solos, and I don't remember. It was like a 2-week tour, 3-week tour, and Merle waited, gave me 2 or 3 nights to kind of settle in. He knew I was very young and very scared, and Tiny was helping me as much as he could, and there was some twin fiddle stuff we were supposed to do, which I still have the charts actually that Tiny wrote out for me, and I kind of did okay on those, and then Merle started kind of once in a while throwing a solo my way, and I remember just failing miserably, just blowing it, just making it through. And Tiny would laugh, and he would laugh, Merle would laugh, everybody in the band's laughing. He's this kid just falling on his ass out there. And but they were all very, very nice to me, and that very first tour, I remember we played some dinner house somewhere, and the stage was elevated and enough to where people were in there eating, but the stage was high enough to where they had to look up to see us as they're eating, so we're looking down at them. And the tables ran right up to the edge of the stage. And Merle decided to throw me a solo. I'd been sitting there and sitting there and sitting there, and nothing was happening for me. Tiny was getting all the solos. And I turned around to ask Tiny something. And this was, of course, after Tiny's warning, never take your eyes off. You never know when he's going to point that bow at you. And I turned around to ask Tiny something. He was sitting right next to me. And I remember the look on Tiny's face. He looked at me. He looked over at Merle. He looked at me. He looked over at Merle. And I thought, uh-oh, I'm missing something. And I turned around and looked over at Merle, and he's standing there pointing his bow at me, waiting for me to do something. But we all were sitting down at the time. We all had chairs. And when he pointed at you, you stood up, you played your solo, and you sat back down. Well, I missed the whole beginning of the solo, obviously. And by the time I realized that I'd screwed up, I leapt up out of that chair and dropped my bow over the edge of the stage, and it landed on a table, landed right in their dinner, and they began to laugh. And they picked up my bow and handed it up to me over the stage. And I thought, well, shit, that's it. I'm done. And it was all covered with their food and everything. And I looked over at Merle, and he was doubled up, just laughing. I've never seen him laugh so hard since. He was just doubled up laughing. And Tiny was laughing. The people who handed me my bow were laughing, because I had to get up, walk over to the edge of the stage, reach down and grab my bow and walk back to my chair. So it's quite an incident, and at the end of the tour, Merle kept trying. He kept trying to throw me things, teach me things, show me things, and end of the tour, he kind of said, I see a lot of potential in you, and he said, if Tiny thinks you're that good, then I'm going with Tiny, but we're going to have to let you go. I don't think you're quite ready for what we're doing out here. I think you need to go back to the honky-tonks and learn a lot more before we can have you out here. Which, of course, broke my heart, but it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so I swore to myself at that moment that it would never happen to me again. And I went back to work feverishly, played with every band I could find. Any gig that came up, I took it. Met some wonderful people, made wonderful friends, played in bars. My friend Dennis Barney, bless his heart, he had the house gig in Sacramento at a place called the Country Comfort. We worked there like 7 nights a week for 2.5 years. And I learned how to sing. I learned how to sing harmony. I learned how to take solos. Working 7 nights a week, you learn a lot. You learn.
Oh yeah.
And then in 1986, Merle called me again, and at that point, it was Clint had come along, Clint Strong, and he was the new golden boy. Every solo that came along, Clint got the solo. I mean, he was great. You know how great Clint was or is. And there's Roy Nichols sitting there, and Merle would look over that direction, and Roy would get ready to play, but Merle was actually looking at Clint. And so it was a real guitar-driven band at the time, and us fiddle players. And at the time, it was Jimmy Belkin. Tiny had already gone on and quit, and then had gone on to other things. So Jimmy Belkin was there, and we were great friends. I loved Jimmy dearly.
He was a great guy. A lot of fun.
But we just sat there, all night long. You're getting paid to just sit there and listen to guitar players play, because Merle just thought the world of Clint's playing. Just he wanted to hear that kid play. So after about 6 months of that, I thought, I was having more fun. You know, I'm a huge Merle fan, of course, and did the whole thing. But I needed to play. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing and get paid for it. And so I quit, and I went back to the bars. Went back to playing with Dennis and the little hockey tonk bands that I knew. And, you know, in that period I met my wife, and in 1988, Dwight called, and off to work I went with him for those long 15 years. And wonderful years. I mean, his career was just taking off, and people were beginning to hear about him. So I got to watch and be part of the beginning of Dwight's stardom up to the apex of his stardom, and rode that wave for a long time. And at one point, Dwight, you know, 15 years into it, Dwight wanted to change directions and let everybody go. But at that point, I was already, since I lived in Northern California, 10 miles away from Merle, I was already working during my breaks on that record, Haggard Like Never Before. And I told Merle, oh man, I just signed the papers on my house that I bought, first house I bought, and I get a phone call and I'm done. The whole band was fired. And he just looked at me and said, well, come back to work with me. My record player disappeared, don't know where he went. I said to him, you got a job. So I really have not, up until the present moment with the passing of our boss, you know, it's been a 30-year constant run of working.
I was so impressed with the musicianship of the band that's together now, and you know how precise it was and how authentic it was to the to the Stranger sound, and
Yeah.
You have a large part to do with that, and I know that's something you guys worked hard on, and it really showed. It was an outstanding group of musicians.
Well, I'm very proud of that. You know, I was lucky to get Dwight's old bass player and Dwight's old drummer on the gig. I'd been trying for 10 years, and he finally allowed it to happen. And so I'm really pleased. It's part of my redemption. You know, it's part of my one of the things that I'm proudest of and that I felt like I could pay him back was to bring those two guys along, because they made a huge difference. Jimmy Christie and Taras Pradania. They brought it back to life for him, and so the last shows that Merle did, the last 2-3 years, were as good as they could possibly be, and we had many big name people, and I use that term loosely, big name in as far as names that you would know, all said the same thing. This is the best Strangers that we have heard in the last 20 years.
It certainly was a great group. Absolutely.
I'm very, very pleased with that and proud that I could be the guy that facilitated that. And so...
As well you should be. Absolutely.
I appreciate you noticing, and I appreciate you saying that.
Well, folks, I do want to tell you, go to Amazon.com. Scott has a couple great albums on there. There's one called Souvenirs, A New Reason to Care. And
You're a fun guy.
he's got one with his running buddy Doug Colosio. It's called A Couple of Strangers. I wonder where that title came from.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
And some great music. Scott, you're an awesome musician, and you're an excellent singer too. Doug sent me a song several years ago called With All This Weather. And man,
yeah.
I love that song. You did such a great job on that.
Well, thank you. It was a good little song. It was a lot of fun. We had a stretch there where we wrote and we played almost every day for months on end, and came up with some pretty good stuff.
You sure did. You sure did. We were talking about Down on the Corner of Misery and Pain. That's another one I love too.
It's a good title. I don't know that we actually ever really finished. I mean, we finished it, but I don't think it was. I think we had a ways to go before we could have really honestly say it was done.
Yeah, good song. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I used to perform it in my band.
Yeah.
Good song. But anyway, I'm sure you're going to keep on making music no matter what it's going to be, and I look forward to hearing more from you. And I hope you'll take some time and be able to come back on the show again. I'd love to have you anytime.
Anytime, Scott. You just let me know. I'm here. I'll talk to you anytime you want to.
I appreciate that. Well, thanks so much, Scott Joss, My Kind of Country. Thank you so much, Scott.
You're welcome, buddy. I look forward to the next time we speak.
Me too.